Now that the story's been scratched, it is only part of contingency planning. But it was a symptom of the dramatic turn of events in South Australia, and it flushed out other remarks from water academics and people like Tim Flannery, indicating that things were really much worse than had been foreshadowed, even earlier this year. So is Adelaide, let alone some whole regions of South Australia, in serious bother. Considering that the vast amount of its drinking water comes from the beleaguered Murray, something many of us outside the state may not have quite realized. Is their predicament something we have to face up to as a nation?
Those of you who've never heard the term Neo-Latin may be forgiven for thinking it's a new South American dance craze. If you're puzzled when I tell you it has something to do with the language of Romans, take heart. Over the years many classes who have confessed they're not really sure what it is either. Some have assumed that they're so-called Late Latin, written at the end of the Roman Empire.
We've decided to adopt, just as a loose theme for the course, a biological theme so that you can see the connections between chemistry and biology and the things you might consider doing in the future. We want you to think about the molecules that are relevant to your body, the processes that occur in your body, the chemistry that's going on and how energy plays a role. And we've divided the course into 4 sections, and after each section there will be a midterm. The first one is about matter.
I'm going to argue that the tremendous increases in productivity that we associate with the Industrial Revolution originate not so much from changes in science or technology or new inventions, where England was far from unique, as from changes in attitudes towards morality, towards what constitutes the good. Attitudes towards property, which became England individuals long before it did on the continent. Attitudes toward the proper role of government. And together, these attitudes constitute much of what the Luddites were protesting against.
For all his fame and celebration, William Shakespeare remains a mysterious figure with regards to personal history. There are just 2 primary sources for information on the bard: his works, and various legal and church documents that have survived from Elizabethan times. Naturally, there are many gaps in this body of information, which tells us little about Shakespeare the man.
Financial markets swung wildly yesterday in the frenzied trading market by further selling of equities and fears about an unraveling of the global carry trade. At the same time, trading in the US and European credit markets were exceptionally heavy for a 3rd consecutive day. London trading was marked by particularly wild swings in the prices of credit derivatives, used to insure investors against corporate defaults.
Close to the idea of 2 or more languages being used for instruction is the concept of language across the curriculum. In all content areas, students learn skills, knowledge, understanding, concepts and attitudes mostly through language. Thus, every curriculum area develops language competence. All subject areas, from music to mathematics, science to sport, contribute to the growth of a child's language or languages. At the same time, achievement in a particular curriculum area is partly dependent on proficiency in the language of that area. Obtaining fluency in the language of chemistry, psychology or mathematics, for example, is important to understanding that subject. Taking the United States as an example, it is unlikely that such students will learn English solely through unmodified content instruction. Their level of understanding of English may be insufficient for them to fully comprehend mathematics or social studies as it normally taught to proficient English speakers, irrespective of whether a transmission of knowledge, pouring nuggets of knowledge into empty heads approach or a progressive discovery learning approach is taken by the teacher.
The Anglophone North American cultural influence is often so strong and pervasive that French immersion children are in danger of becoming passive rather than active bilinguals outside the school gates. The same occurs in immersion schools in many other countries, where the minority language is a language of the classroom, but the majority language is the peer, prestige, language in the schoolyard and on the streets.
A child may not choose to engage in creative thinking because she lacks self-confidence and does not believe that she has anything of value to offer. Or maybe she becomes anxious when given an open-ended task with several possible solutions. Through observation and conversation, an adult can work out what is causing the child's difficulties and encourage her to work through them.
The curriculum tends to be the same for immersion children as for their mainstream peers. While immersion attempts to cultivate empathy for a student's second language culture, the immersion curriculum has hitherto tended not to have major distinctive components to develop such empathy and participation. For example, in Canada, a no challenge is that French becomes the language of school and English the language of the playground, street and vocational success.
It is important to consider what might constitute originality in the work of a young child. After all, only a child prodigy could be expected to come up with something new and valuable to society. Instead, each child's creative abilities can be related to his/her personal stage of development. For example, a young child's work may be adaptive and original for that particular child and/or in relation to children in their class or age group.
Highlighting this potential barrier sheds light to Egan's statement on being imaginative within education, as a process is intended to stimulate the ability to visualize situations, events or outcomes different to those that already exist currently or in the past. If learners become too reliant on educators giving information consequently, it requires them to think less, which stunts active, critical and creative thinking.
While there is a body of research into the impact of artists in school schemes, the role of artists in encouraging young children's creativity has not yet been well researched. In other words, although the involvement of professional artists and creative workers has considerable potential to be helpful, we do not have research evidence to say what kinds of involvement may have the greatest impact on creativity. Children find it easy to transfer learning from one domain to another. All the evidence shows that most children find it very difficult to transfer learning from one area to another. Knowledge and skills are so context-specific that children may simply fail to recognize that something they had already learned can be applied to a new situation. Adults can help children to make the connection.